Sooner Nation, gather around. We've got a remarkable show set for you today, as we typically do, right? Come on now, 60-second edition of Oklahoma Sooners Live. Please bring your comments and your questions. Leave them in the live chat, and we will get to them as we discuss OU football with the weeks counting down to first Big 12 Media Days, then, of course, August camp, and then that opener against the Miners of UTEP. We got Jason Ray, as we always do, on the line from Last Word on College Football to help us break it down. Jason makes this whole thing go. Jason, how you doing today?
Doing really good, Mark. How about you?
I'm good. I am good. We talk typical weather discussion at times right out of the gate, but it's more like April or May right here, like 70, 72, something in that range. So nothing what it was the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's not too bad here as well. I know it's supposed to get up into the mid to upper 90s next week, so typical summer. But I think that the light at the end of the tunnel for me is when you start seeing college football preview magazines come
That's
out,
it.
you
Yeah.
know we're starting to get a little bit closer.
So I explained this to somebody else recently, Jason. Listen where I'm located, and you're going to get an idea of the dearth of college football fandom here. So I knew the magazines were coming out. I had talked to enough people, saw them on Twitter and so forth. Walmart, CVS, Walgreens. I could name a few other spots, and then even to a Barnes and Noble. I went to a Barnes and Noble this last weekend. They must have had 6 or 7 like racks of magazines that went 10 or 12 feet long on both sides.
Oh, my goodness.
No college football magazines. None.
Really? Wow.
That's the interest in college football in Connecticut, I guess.
That's crazy. I mean, and you think, because I was just at the local grocery store the other day, and I saw a bunch of available, and this is just a small, kind of a
Yeah.
mom and pop grocery store. So it's kind of interesting to think about. You would think that the interest in college football would maybe a little bit higher here than maybe even Connecticut. But yeah, that's interesting to your point.
So, yes, that's it's all about the NFL and the Yankees and the Red Sox and all of that. So, I've been fortunate enough the last couple years to have 1 or 2 sent my way for free. I guess I'm going to have to go the ordering route. I thought I'd be able to pick them up on a newsstand somewhere. But, we'll get that figured out. All right, everyone. Again, comments and questions, leave them there in the live chat. We appreciate you being here. Bring a friend, and keep those notifications open, because we don't know from week to week at this point when we're going to be live. We'll nail down a time and get it to you. But hey, if you are subscribed and have the notifications on, you will be all set. Keon Brown has made his choice. Wide receiver out of Tallahassee, Florida, is making his way to the Midwest.
Yeah, yeah, Mark. We had last week when we were discussing this, we said Oklahoma had a big recruiting weekend last weekend with the Champ U barbecue, and I think it's different under Venables than it was under Riley. It's more of kind of a family type atmosphere, versus how it has been previously. But lots of good news, just kind of anecdotally from recruits that were there, just how great of a situation it is, and how great it is to, speak with Venables, and just the nature of the culture of the program right now. But specifically to your point there, Oklahoma did get a commitment from Keon Brown. As you mentioned, he's a 4-star wide receiver out of Tallahassee. Oklahoma went up against Alabama, Auburn, Florida State, others for his services, and committed to Oklahoma a few days ago on the 5th of June. So yeah, a really big time get for Oklahoma. As we've talked a little bit about, they've been a little bit slower this year in terms of getting some of those commitments. But as we talked, I think there's a little bit more, I think, onus on making sure these kids are very firm and solid in their decision before making that commitment to Oklahoma. So yeah, we'll see if there's any others. Oklahoma still has a lot of visitors on campus upcoming this weekend, and Oklahoma's really doing kind of as most programs are with the dead periods coming pretty soon, and then classes will be starting before we know it here in early August around the country. So I think Oklahoma's doing a really good job at getting a lot of these kids in, getting a lot of there's a lot of stuff going around the program. Oklahoma's got a lot of their summer camps and stuff like that going on right now. So really exciting time for recruiting, and but yeah, that commitment from a wide receiver is certainly something that's good, and will move Oklahoma up the rankings. They're still kind of, like I said, they're still much lower than most people would anticipate at this point in the year, but I don't think it's anything to be concerned about. That'll start getting going here as the summer winds. We're in the middle of the summer, I guess, but as the summer starts winding down, getting closer to August.
All right, that's Keon Brown in the fold. And just to give you the metrics, I'm Mr. Brown, everyone. We've got 6'3", 188, again, out of Tallahassee, Florida. It's James Richards High School, 48th rated wide receiver in the country, according to the 247 Sports Composite, number 366, national 68 in Florida. I find this discrepancy to be interesting. We'll see if 247 Sports, when they, I believe they're coming up on another rankings period in which they will adjust the rankings based on what they see in these camps that are typically held in June. 48th rated, Jason, in the composite. So we've only got 3 services we're dealing with here, whether that's ESPN/On3, and then, of course, Rivals along with 247 Sports. 247 Sports has him rated as the 96th wide receiver. So you got to think that the other 2 are, he's in the top 20. I could look him up, but just seems to be a large discrepancy there. And again, I think the closer they get to the finish line in regards to putting in another season and showing more on film during game action as a senior, that the services seem to come a little bit closer in their evaluations.
Yeah, it's interesting, Mark, to your point on what those evaluations look like. And I think we've talked a little bit about this, but Oklahoma and Levy's looking for a very specific type. So when you look at his height, 6'3", that's what I think Oklahoma's really looking for and Levy's looking for. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see as some of these kids go through these camps this summer, and as you get into the season a little bit, into their senior seasons, what the rankings look like if they start to be a little bit closer, to your point, on from a composite perspective.
Got Jason Ray here from Last Word on College Football. Joins us each and every week to break down Oklahoma football. This is edition number 62, so please join us here each and every week. We'll take your comments and questions. Quite a bit going on, of course, with recruiting, some of it tangible with Keon Brown and so forth, but other targets out there. And certainly we will get more news, we would think, in the next 3 to 4 weeks after commits come in, and we'll hit the Big 12 news coming up here soon. But first, Jackson Arnold, of course, he committed back in January as the 5th rated quarterback in the country and the 5th rated player in the state of Texas. Just a high end prospect, 31st in the country, according to the composite. And there's some recent news concerning Jackson Arnold.
Yeah, he recently, Mark, had just, I think it was as of last week, recently just got his 5th star. So he's the first 5-star in the 2023 cycle for Oklahoma. And with some of the changes that they've had around the quarterback room, it'll be interesting to see how he fits into that mold in 2023. When you look at Dylan Gabriel, he still has some time, obviously, just depending on how good of a season he is. I think he still has up to 3 years to be able to play. So it'll be interesting to see what that quarterback room looks like as next year and the year after goes on, especially with the transfers that they got in as well.
Jason, maybe somebody should alert Lincoln Riley of Jackson Arnold getting his 5th star, because maybe he thought that Oklahoma was incapable of getting 5 stars at quarterback. I don't know, without him there. but that seems to be in line with his narrative of Oklahoma football versus what he now has at USC. I don't know that he would have made these statements. That would be we all know what the answer would be had Lincoln Riley been asked about comparing the USC and Oklahoma jobs 2 years ago, let's say, and what was capable of being brought to campus, at those two respective universities. But for those of you, give us a pass on this one, everyone. Who we seem to have a divided audience when it comes to Lincoln Riley talk. Some of it is very intriguing to some, and I certainly understand completely all of you who say, move on. We don't want to hear about Lincoln Riley. Coaches another team. Absolutely. He just seems to, as to your point before we started to record, Jason, he seems to stir things up or bring things up that tie him back to Oklahoma. And this seems to be a regular occurrence with him.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, he's turning into. I think obviously he's always going to, for the foreseeable future, be a villain in Oklahoma's eyes. But I think just nationally, I think he's becoming more and more of a villain of college football. And to your point, Mark, I think we all, as we talk through this each and every week, we all want to try to move on from this, but we want to bring everyone that tunes in here the news that's going on within Oklahoma football, um and exactly what's going on. And to your point, every time it looks like there's going to be some die down of that, either he says something or someone else says something, and more often than not, it's him taking interviews about the situation and just not wanting to let it die. And most some have seen it, but there's a specific blurb into this interview that he took with Dennis Dodds, that where he talks about Oklahoma's roster, in the playoff years compared to that of other teams. And his and just paraphrasing his quote, he talks about in his four stops with Oklahoma being, at best the third of the four rosters, through those seasons. And then at the very last, he takes a little bit of a shot at some of his previous players when he really kind of talks about he couldn't imagine building it couldn't be a setting where they could build a better roster at couldn't build a better roster at USC than he's built at Norman. So again, a little bit of a shot towards the Oklahoma program, some of his ex-players, and things like that. So when you I think a lot of, as we talked about before, Mark, there's not really any debate that it's easier to recruit, to USC in Los Angeles than it is to Norman, Oklahoma, right? I mean, there's a lot of advantages that some of these kids have, but at the same time, USC hasn't had the level of success just as recent as Oklahoma has as well. So, it'll be interesting to see how this continues to unfold, as we seem to talk about this every single week. But it's going to be very interesting to see, how these two teams play out this year. I think there's a lot of national belief, Mark, that this Oklahoma team is going to take a fairly significant step back in 2022. Um, and I don't necessarily think that's the thought with the media inside the state of Oklahoma, but I think nationally, even Joel Klatt, came out a couple weeks ago and talked about, he thought that this was going to be the least talented or the worst Oklahoma team that there's been in the last 20 years. And anybody that follows Klatt knows he has always been very, very very complimentary of not only Lincoln Riley, but Oklahoma as a program overall. So, and then when you look at the other side of it, Mark, I think there's a lot of people nationally that just think, okay, this USC team is going to be outstanding. They're going to be phenomenal. Just a great offensive team next year. So it'll be interesting to see as we get into the season, certainly as we get into August when camps open up, what things look like from both sides both sides of this. And we've also talked about the ability of the 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 guys that Oklahoma has on campus from a defensive staff perspective, is an upgrade over the previous staff. So when you look at that, and then when you look at the defensive staff that Lincoln Riley has built with his team, that is predominantly people that was on his staff at Oklahoma the last few years. So it's it's going to be like I said, it's going to be interesting to watch and see what that looks like. I think both teams have a couple of early matchups, and then not necessarily the non-conference, but the early season. I think USC has Stanford second week of the year. Oklahoma has Nebraska third week of the year. So before they get into conference play, so yeah, it'll be interesting to see the trajectory of these two teams through 2022 and obviously beyond.
So the first thing that hits me is that most coaches by nature, and I think this is a good thing, and when I say most, I mean 90 some percent, would take the job at USC like a Lincoln Riley, and they would make this statement. They would just talk up USC, the advantages of USC, the good qualities of USC, and they would leave alone their previous job. They would not make mention of it. If they were pressed on it, they would be complimentary about all the great things that they did there and that can be accomplished there. And it's a great place to go to school, and it's a great place to play football. And they would just be complimentary, and they would kind of leave it at that and not make any kind of direct comparison. The next one would be, I thought it was a classless move to rank the talent on the roster versus the other playoff teams. I just don't think that's, again, like you say, it's a slight, these guys went to battle for you, football speaking, and you were in a playoff situation largely because of their efforts taking you there. And he's probably right, but I just don't think that needs to be stated. It's making an excuse to a certain extent concerning the results of those playoff games. And now it sets him up basically by talking about how great USC is and that he can't think of a place where he could build a roster to the degree that he can at USC. It sets him up to have to now go out and prove it.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only Mark, you're absolutely sliding your previous kids that played for you. You're sliding the previous university that handed you the keys, to the castle, so to speak. And you kind of say that castle's not good enough for me. But also, it's not only that, but you're sliding some of these other programs, right? You're sliding Tuscaloosa, right? You're sliding, Georgia, Columbus. I mean, all these different programs that you feel like, okay, I couldn't build a better roster at Alabama than I can at USC. So he has put the he has put the target squarely on his back with these comments, and that's why I think he's starting to become that national villain. That I mean, I think to a certain degree, Mark, Saban's always going to be that villain to a certain degree, just because of just because of how successful he's been. But everything that's happening here with Riley is he's doing everything he can to take over that top spot.
Oklahoma football talk here each and every week. We're going to come your way, we believe, on Friday. But again, we're setting things up each and every week as we go. So just know that it's Sooners Live, and we're here every week. And just subscribe and make sure that notifications bell is clicked so you know when we go live. Big announcement came out here in the last couple hours. we knew the teams, we just didn't know when. So BYU, Houston, UCF, and Cincinnati will be playing Big 12 football in 2023. And unless things are announced by the SEC that pulls OU and Texas out to join the Southeastern Conference sooner than what has been announced just recently, that it was still a 2025 expansion move, that we'll have a 16 team, pardon me, we will have a 14 team Big 12 here in 2023.
Yeah, it's interesting, Mark. I know that we've talked about that, and I think the thought was, there was some negotiations over the last 3 to 4 weeks that this was something that was a very real possibility in 2023. But now with the buyout, which is about, from what I've seen, about $18 million per team, for the buyout to get into the Big 12 in 2023. And you're seeing a lot of these other teams starting to follow suit, Mark. You've got some of the Conference USA teams that were moving over to the American Athletic. They're starting to announce that they're joining in 2023. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see what Oklahoma and Texas's play going to be here. I saw a tweet from Brian. His name's escaping me now. From the Austin American Statesman, he said he talked to a high-ranking official at Texas and says that Oklahoma and Texas are likely still in the 2024 cycle. Brian Davis, I believe, is his name. And so I don't know. There's, like I said, there's two schools of thoughts on this, right? If you're are you willing to hang around in a in a league that you're not going to be in? And is the Big 12, how interested are they in having Oklahoma and Texas in this league that that they're not going to be part of? We talked about last week, like, what do you do with the divisions? What does the conference championship look like? What does the schedule look like? Are they willing to do something special for a year, and then go back to what their future schedule is going to look like? So, I mean, that's all interesting to think about as well. Now, I think with the COVID year a couple years ago, a lot of teams, there's some conferences that did that, right? They shook up their schedule a little bit just for that 1 year. So it's not certainly not unprecedented by any stretch. But some of the things that I've continued to hear, Mark, even kind of this morning with everything happening, is that Oklahoma and Texas are likely to stick around for a year within this kind of makeshift conference, which will but you never know. Like I said, we would expect to hear something probably before the August timeframe. Maybe not in any official capacity from Oklahoma or Texas, but probably no news is maybe not necessarily good news, depending on your the way that you look at it. But no news is specifically probably means that Oklahoma and Texas are going to stay put in this Big 12 for a year. And so, like I said, there's different schools of thought. I think the thought right now is maybe Oklahoma's not as ready as they would like to be to enter the SEC in the 2023 season, with with everything that's changed, a little bit of stability. Texas is obviously not in great shape to be to be ready for the SEC immediately. So, but again, the other side of it, you kind of think, okay, how much difference will a year make from 2023 to 2024? So, yeah, I would, like I said, I would lean towards everything I'm hearing, maybe 2024, but at the same time, you almost ask yourself, why wait another year? Why, if you have the money there, if you're willing to spend it, right? I mean, if it's something that you're not necessarily willing to spend early to leave early, at least 2 years early, then that's certainly a consideration as well.
Sounds like I'm going to get my wish, which is to get a Big 12 with all of them in the same conference, at least for one season. I just want to see, although we've heard that the Big 12 will do everything possible to build Oklahoma and Texas's schedules so that they are only playing those existing members of the Big 12 for as much as I want to see them play the new members of the Big 12. I guess it's feasible to just set up their 9-game conference seasons against the existing other 9 members of the conference and then build everybody else's schedules accordingly. But I would like to see those games being played. As we mentioned, Houston and Oklahoma got together about 6 or 7 years ago. They've got some history. Certainly, Houston and Texas have a long history back in the Southwest Conference. Would love to see those two get together. BYU and Oklahoma played about 15 years ago. Cincinnati emerging as the group of 5 here in the last 4 or 5 seasons. It would be intriguing to see a Cincinnati that's been able to match up against some pretty heavy Power 5 teams, beating Notre Dame last year. See them match up against Texas and Oklahoma and UCF as well. But as we mentioned, I think in one of our previous conversations when this was first announced, that Texas really needs to step up its game, or that's going to be another in the layers of embarrassing results that Texas football has endured if they have 4 group of 5 teams enter the Big 12 and Texas has to play them and they lose.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right, and the last time Texas had a home and home with BYU, that they got hammered on both sides of it, right? I mean, I think it was a little bit more competitive in Austin, but still, I mean, it was a bloodbath in Provo. So yeah, that'll be interesting. I mean, I think for me, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, it's pretty well set in stone how excited that most people are. Um, for Oklahoma to go into the SEC, and what those matchups will look like, and the culture, and everything that's going to be changing with the entrance into the SEC. But also, I think to your point, it would be intriguing for me to see some of these games that you could see, within the Big 12. I mean, still Oklahoma, absolutely. And some trip. How intriguing would be Oklahoma going to Orlando to play UCF, especially with Dylan Gabriel on the team. Still, if that were to happen, and then trips to Provo would be pretty interesting as well. So yeah, I mean, count me. I mean, I'm good. Obviously, either way, I think it's exciting either way, but I think it would be cool to have one season of this kind of makeshift Big 12. And I think for fans that kind of want to flaunt that, is you have the ability to win the new Big 12 championship in the last year that is there before moving on to the SEC.
Yeah, they're most likely matchups that we're not going to see because you only have 3 or 4 non-conference games. The majority of those are played against the group of 5 or the FCS. So there's only 1 or 2 Power 5 opponents out there for every school. And so the likelihood of scheduling these teams later down the line is remote. It just mathematically isn't probable. So I would like to see it. Again, I understand the points that have been making that the Big 12 would most likely steer clear of those matchups as much as they possibly can, which I think they can build a schedule and exclude Oklahoma and Texas from the 4 new entries schedules. But I would like to see the potential of those games being played. Jason, we also had here in the last 2 or 3 days, the over-unders came out according to Vegas, and Oklahoma State's at 8.5. I was going to put them in there with Oklahoma. But just focusing on the Sooners at 9.5. Do you have any preliminary thoughts about that Vegas number?
I mean, I think it's interesting. I think it's about right on. I think you could make an argument for 10 or maybe even 10 and a half. But kind of depending on some of the how some of these swing games go. Um, when you think about the schedule, Nebraska's going to be I don't know that I would say it's going to be a toss up, right? But I think it'll be a difficult game navigating for their first game um, away from Norman in the on the year. Obviously, Texas is always going to be kind of a toss up type of game. And then you go to Iowa State later in the year, host Baylor, host Oklahoma State. So yeah, I think the 9.5, 10 range is probably right on. I think a lot of people think kind of coming in. Um, 10-2 is about where a lot of people think that this team median their median lies. I mean, there's a scenario where I think a lot of people think that this team could certainly be 11-1, but then if things kind of bounce the other way, it could be a 9-3 type of season. So so I think 9.5 is right on, and I think like I said early on, it'll be interesting with this team to see defensively and offensively for that matter how they adjust to both new systems. I mean, having the spring ball was absolutely critical in getting the install and everything that they've been able to do. So I think the 9.5 is fairly right on. I would probably just right now, obviously not my official prediction, or anything like that. I would probably lean slightly above the over, but I think that's pretty solid right there.
All right. Talking up OU, as we do each and every week with all of you, please leave your comments and questions there in the live chat. Appreciate you being here for Oklahoma Sooners Talk. Check out the other videos on the channel. We've had Parker Thune from OU Insider here in recent days. So check out those videos as well as the ones with Jason and myself. It seems as though most Oklahoma fans are looking ahead and a bit more excited to join the SEC than they are to stick around the Big 12,
Yeah.
which I get. Cole Satterfield is saying you can easily go back at 247 Sports in their recruiting classes. They are in the top 10, other than one lately, way better than what Arkansas. Is there anything between Oklahoma and Arkansas? I know they've played in some bowl games.
Yeah, there's not really any real rivalry there. I mean, there was more of a little bit, in the 70s with Oklahoma played Arkansas a couple of years in the in the Orange Bowl, and one year, Arkansas actually upset
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma,
Lou
and so
Holtz.
with Lou Holtz, yeah, absolutely. So I don't think there's any rivalry now, but I think the one thing that's interesting, and we haven't really talked a lot about this, Mark, but it looks like the SEC is going to go more towards a kind of a three permanent rivalry type of game, and then kind of a so there's a lot, and then the rest of it will be kind of rotating year in and year out. So I don't think we've talked a ton about that, but there's a lot of speculation out there, right, in terms of who Oklahoma's annual three teams would be, and obviously Texas is going to be one. So you've got the other two, and I think there's a lot of school of thoughts that Arkansas and probably Missouri will be the other two. You could see a scenario where Texas A&M is there as well, but I think Arkansas, Missouri, and Texas are probably going to be Oklahoma's three permanent rivals or permanent games, however you want to put it. So I think so to answer that question, no, I don't think there's necessarily a rivalry right now, but it certainly could become a rivalry if Arkansas is a team that Oklahoma continues to play year in and year out in the new SEC.
Right, folks, we have talked the scheduling of Cincinnati, BYU, Houston, and UCF into the Big 12 in 2023. So that became official a few hours ago. We've looked at recruiting, and we have looked at Lincoln Riley's latest on Oklahoma and his comparison between USC and Oklahoma. If there's anything else that you guys would like us to address, then certainly we will. Otherwise, we can certainly wrap it up at this point. Jason, anything else? Any parting shots for this week?
No, I don't think so. I think I know this is a football show, but there was a lot of excitement this week about Oklahoma and the Women's College World Series for softball. They just won their um, sixth national championship last night in softball and beating Texas 10-5. So that was exciting. Where there's a little bit of a downturn in football news, there's at least Oklahoma's got softball there going on, and it's honestly it's kind of cool to see the growth of that sport, Mark. I mean, it's something big in the state of Oklahoma with the Women's College World Series being in Oklahoma City, just down the road. But yeah, I mean, I think other than that, there's not a a ton of stuff going on. However, I mean, I know as we keep going, get through here through the summer, there'll be more and more stuff going on. Oklahoma just started summer workouts about a week ago with Schmitty, and you're already seeing the some of the players tweet out about how much tougher the summer conditioning is than what they went through in the spring area, which is to be expected as they keep going forward. So there'll be some stuff on that and then recruiting, but yeah, getting closer and closer. It's exciting to get through. Hopefully, start getting through the summer and getting into fall here.
I got to think, not to take a shot here, but that Lincoln Riley, being involved in football for as long as he has, would understand that those national championships are not just won by acquiring the most 5 stars. They're also, there's a lot of work put into it, and it's not just game study, film study, and scheming. And, there's a physical aspect of the game that certainly pays off late in the fourth quarter. So we will see if that's certainly the direction of the Oklahoma program. It's a much different direction, and under Brent Venables. So we will see if the success follows. All right.
Absolutely.
All right, everyone. Oklahoma Sooners live each and every week. Please like the show before you leave. Just hit the like button. Also, subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football. That way, once you hit the bell for the notifications, you know when we go live each and every week. Catch Jason and the rest of the crew there at Last Word on College Football. You see it right there, lastwordoncollegefootball.com. Check out Jason's work and everybody else there, Last Word on College Football. That crew has always been so good to us here. Jason, well, you have a great weekend, and we will get together next week.
All right, sounds good. You do the same, Mark.